Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to episode 40 plus. We're not sure which one this will be. 41, 2, or 3. It's me back. I got my father, Jeff Crabtree, back for number 2 of Inside the Mirror. This is your first video. This is our first video podcast, though, Pop. So you're busy, man.
Looking forward to it.
Got a lot going on. So thanks for sharing some of your time with us. I know that you got a hectic schedule. COVID has not slowed your schedule down in any way. It's just 10x'd it probably. But thanks for coming on. Always happy to talk to you. So here we go.
Well, thanks for the invitation. Appreciate it.
Yeah, of course. So we're kind of just going to start talking, but as we were talking before, what I really want to address here is what any human being breathing right now or in the past, present, or future has dealt with is struggles. Obviously, we are not blind to the fact that the world is going through massive struggle, one on top of the other right now. But even before this, say 6 months ago, the world was still full of struggle. You've dealt with struggle. I've dealt with struggle. Everybody listening has struggled in some area. Everybody that's ever lived has dealt with something of some type of tough situation or something that wasn't easy to handle. So again, the reason where I'm bringing you on is because you have a lot of experience counseling people, helping people through difficult times, whatever that may be, divorces or tough, just anything. You've had a lot of experience helping people through tough times. And as the world is at the toughest time that maybe my generation has seen, help us out. How do we handle tough times? Like, where do we even begin?
Yeah, well, again, thanks for allowing me to kind of jump on with you. I'm very proud of you and great to get together with you. Yeah, welcome to the earthly journey filled with challenge and struggle and difficulty and heartache and trauma. And as maybe your audience might know, that I've spent over 40 years working in the people business with counseling and coaching and trying to help people. Before I really kind of get into that, I was talking to my father the other day. I'm your dad, and then I have a dad, and he's 92 plus, and he basically said this was the most difficult time he's seen in his life. That's pretty astounding to realize that a 92-year-old man who served in the Korea War says that what he's seeing going on in our culture is the most difficult thing he's seen in his lifetime. So that's just kind of on a macro level is like, wow. So yeah, welcome to the earthly journey filled with ups and downs, twists and turns, really good days, really hard days, days of clarity, days of confusion. And yeah, as we started out 2020, maybe you heard this same thing. A lot of people were saying, well, 2020 represents eyesight, everybody wants 2020 vision, that this was going to be the year that all of us were going to be able to see more clearly about life and ourselves and relationship and bigger picture and eternity. And maybe I didn't jump on that bandwagon, but I certainly wasn't opposed to it. I think that was kind of good, but I don't think any of us could have anticipated what started several months ago with COVID-19. And then, as you've heard me say, the cultural issues, or maybe even the cultural conflict or the cultural chaos. So yeah, it's a really difficult time. So I think the question was, how do you deal with that? And again, through coaching and counseling long-term, I always say to people, we first need to kind of manage our expectations. What I mean by that is people usually budget their finances. There's a certain amount of money that comes in, and then they need to allocate it to meet certain bills and resources. And so they build in money allocated for certain areas. What I mean by that, in the emotional area, we just don't usually budget for trials. We don't budget for difficulty. We don't budget in our lives for trauma. And yet the reality is we're all going to face multiple chapters, season times of life that are just really, really hard. So what happens if we don't allocate it in our mentality, in our thinking, in our emotions, when those trials, those heartaches, when COVID or other things hit, we're not really prepared because we are living a life like it's never going to happen. Life is just going to be good and comfortable and wonderful, but that's not reality. So the first thing I try to do is in helping people where they're at, or or moving through things is they have to begin to think in their minds that there are going to be times of trial and heartache and struggle. Now, that doesn't necessarily make it easier, but it starts the process for them to work through grief and trials a little bit better. Does that kind of lay the stage that, first of all, I think people need to budget in their emotional, mental state that they're going to have trials and difficulties. So when they hit, they're a little more prepared for it.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, what I'm hearing you say is just as if, for me personally, I had over the course of time saved up money, not for anything specific, but it was set aside. Some would call it an emergency fund. And it was set aside, and it was just money that had been saved, resources, financial resources that had been set aside for the unknown, right? And then thankfully I had that, because when COVID hit, I wasn't able to go to work for several months. But thankfully I had planned ahead and allocated resources for the unknown. I think that's what you're saying is emotionally, there needs to be emotional resources allocated for the unknown, aka struggle, aka tough times, but you can't predict that. So you have to be prepared for the unknown in life. And most people, or a lot of people, know financially you got to be prepared for the unknown. But I don't think I've heard anybody say it quite like that, that you need to be emotionally have a reserve set aside for the unknown. So then my question really gets a little tougher is, how do I emotionally build up reserves for the unknown?
Right. First of all, exactly. I love your illustration of the emergency fund with finances because there will be emergencies. That's the point I was trying to make, is that as much as you hope there won't be, that's not life. That's not reality. And it's true also in the emotional realm, like you said, that we need to have a mental, emotional reserve emergency fund. So how do you do that? Well, first, there's probably many ways that you could do that. First of all, is acknowledgement. Like I said, is that we live life many times in denial. I do, you do. Again, I've been in the people business 40 plus years. We don't always want to accept what is. And so first of all, I think I would say on the internal side, we have to know ourselves. We need to have some good self-awareness skills. I found over the years that not many people have really crafted or developed good self-awareness skills. They think they're more aware than they are, but we all as human beings have blind spots, places that we just do not see. Everybody else sees it, but we don't see it. So the first awareness is, how are you going to build up reserve if you're living paycheck to paycheck financially, or paycheck to paycheck emotionally? People do that. They just kind of live, whether it be if they're married or they're dating, or maybe they're in some type of relationship. They've got jobs, they got friends, they got people they party with. I mean, we've all got all of these things going on, and we expend, but we're not always building reserve. And part of that I've found, like obviously, is first of all, is faith for me, is that as I had time to spend with God in prayer and in Bible reading, I am storing up thoughts, hope, encouragement, reality, knowing that at some point I'm making an investment, because I'm going to have to make a withdrawal. So maybe that'll start the discussion, is that just an awareness, and then self-awareness of how you have to build that emergency fund in your mental and emotional reality.
Mm-hmm. It makes me think of, as you say, people that believe that they're very self-aware, but as I'm hearing you say, and I think this is true, a lot of people believe that they're very self-aware, and I've been there too, but have done no work to actually become self-aware or to craft that skill. So to expect that you just have the skill of self-awareness because that's just some random gift you were given, I think is very ignorant. It's just as if I was to not practice. If I was to, in high school, I played basketball, right? If I was to not practice for 8 months and then go into the tryouts thinking that I'm good. I know how to play basketball. I've done it for 16 years. So I should just make the team, right? I should just have the skills, but I haven't practiced them. I'm out of practice. So in my opinion, people in life have lived life and they're 20 or 25 or they're 32 and they go, I've lived life long enough. I know myself, but they haven't actually practiced it. Or maybe they used to and they got good and went, nah, I don't, you know, I now know how to be self-aware. Anything that is not practiced, you're not going to be at your full potential in that skill set, whether it's playing basketball or being self-aware. If you don't have any tactics or practices or routines that continuously help you become self-aware, you cannot be self-aware of just sheer willpower, because I am self-aware because I would like to be. So then again, the next question becomes, what are some tactics to become self-aware?
Yeah, good question. Yeah, I think you're totally right, Kyle, that none of us took a class on self-awareness. Reading, writing, arithmetic, or whatever things we learned in school, and many times we don't find it in our nuclear family or our family of origin. We just assume that it's going to happen. But again, I've been in the people business a long time. The reason that people come in for counseling or for coaching is because they found themselves in trial or in conflict or in challenge. And when I begin to help them process, unpack, a lot of it is they're just not aware of what's happened about themselves. So I just want to reiterate your point. I think that's true, that people have to be trained and they have to be intentional on working on self-awareness. So again, the question then becomes, how do you do that? Again, I'm a man of faith, and so my belief is that when I begin to read the Bible, it's like a mirror. It begins to talk to me about the good of who I am as a human being created in the image of God, but it also shows me the pitfalls, where I'm going to miss it, where I can get derailed, where I can get detoured. And so the best thing for me is to get into my Bible, and it forces me to look at myself, which is a key component of self-awareness. And so that is, for me, probably the best tool. If we're looking for tools or skills or stepping stones for self-awareness, for me, it's looking into the Bible. I know we got a lot of people, I don't like the Bible, or I don't believe in the Bible, because they're looking maybe from a historical point of view or from a theological point of view. Many times I look at the Bible from a mental and emotional point of view. It helps me realize me. It helps me realize others. And so that's maybe the first thing. And second of all, I think we were created for relationships, not only relationship with God, but relationship with others. But we live in a Western culture that's so fiercely independent, especially males, that we're going to the old John Wayne. And I know younger people go, I've heard John Wayne, but they don't know him. But in my era, obviously, he was the idol, rough and tough and strong, and nobody can hurt me, and I can get it done on my own. And that is human nature, that sometimes, especially in the West, we'll do it ourselves. Well, you're not going to be able to really develop good self-awareness skills by yourself, because you have blind spots. And if you don't mind me mentioning, on a psychological point of view, they say that in psychology, about 80% of who we are as human beings are in a subconscious or an unconscious mind. So 80%, that's going to win over the 20% of awareness. And so what happens is that we have issues that involve our lives that are difficult or hard or traumatic, and we don't like that. If something good happens, we want to keep it in the brain. We just nurture it and embrace it so it stays around for a long time. But the negative of life hits us, and it's like our psyche goes into autopilot. We don't like pain. We don't like trauma. So we don't know what to do with it. So automatically we suppress or repress that into a subconscious mind. And so something's going on controlling our life that's 80% that we don't even know what it is. But, it's kind of like a key on a computer. If you hit a certain thing, it comes up on the screen. I remember, there might be a song that I haven't heard for 30 years, but then it comes on the radio, and boy, it can take me right back to 30 years ago. I remember where I was at, or I remember how I like that song, or I remember, because it's been in a subconscious state. It's kind of like the hard drive of a computer versus what's on the screen. There's a whole lot in the hard drive, but you don't see it on the screen until you push a certain button. So I guess the long way, what are some of the skills? Again, I'm a man of faith. I look into the Bible so I can gain some self-awareness. It causes me to look at myself. But then what I'm saying is that we need other people, whether that be friends who will be honest with us, or coaches, or counselors that we can process with, not just when things get bad, but again, so we're having an emergency fund mentally and emotionally. So I guess I think God, I think friends, and I think community, more than just specific people like coaches and counselors. We need friends that are revealing and being honest with us, not negative, but say, hey, did you know you tend to be negative? Or did you know that you tend to be using your mouth inappropriately? Did you notice that you don't treat people with kindness? You know, I don't know if that's kind of where you're going, but so maybe that's part of what we're looking at here.
Yeah, no, I think, and that makes a lot of sense. The last part, what you were saying, because again, we're in this time. I'll speak specifically to the racial situation, right? I don't want to get too far into specifics, but some of the conversation that's being had out there is that you need to hold your friends accountable, right? If you hear your friend saying something that is racially driven or ignorant, racially ignorant, or just wrong, using racial slurs or talking down to somebody, even if it's not to their race. If you have a friend, but that's the conversation now, is the race. So, right, the conversation is, hey, you need to hold your friends accountable. If your friends are saying things that are racially insensitive or racially wrong, you need to hold them accountable. So that's the outcry, and I agree with that. If in life, if you have a friend that's going to talk down about another person for their skin color or for anything, you should have the boldness to stand up as a good friend to help them become better and say, hey, that's not the right thing to do. I love you. That's not the right thing to do. And as your friend, I want to help you be self-aware. I don't know if you even realized that you were saying that or you're behaving in that way, but that's wrong. Again, and that's kind of the message that has been spread with this racial movement, is that we need to hold our friends accountable to make sure that racial equality and the racial injustice does not continue to be an issue, which I agree with. But I also think that part of the issue, though, is that we live in a society and culture where when you do try to confront someone with love, they are so fiercely independent, to your point, or so unwilling to look at themselves, as you said, because 80% of their issues are buried, so they don't want to see it. So it's nice I think it's a great thing to want, not just with race, but when your friends or the people around you say anything that's not okay or wrong, that we should feel free to say, hey, in love, I love you, brother, sister, friend, but let's not be like that. Let's be better. And I'm with that. But the problem is we don't live. I don't come from a generation that is open to correction. I come from the most spoiled generation that history has ever produced. And no offense to the listeners, I'm part of the generation, and the next one we'll see how they turn out. But I come from what has now proven to be the most spoiled in America, the most spoiled, ignorant, selfish, unwilling to listen to others generation that the world has ever produced. Yet we are the generation that's screaming, we need to hold each other accountable. Yet we are the ones who will not hold ourselves accountable. So I know I kind of went off where you were headed a little bit with that, but I just wanted to say that to the listeners or to people that are watching, that if you are going to call for others to behave in a certain way, this is kind of how I'm going to say it, overarching. If you are going to call for others to behave in a certain way, you must be willing to also behave in that way. So as we talk about people facing tough times and learning how to become self-aware and prepare for those tough times, I guess what I'm trying to say is you must be willing to do the things that are going to set you up for that. Because if you're not willing to listen to some help or get a coach or a counselor, or you're not willing to listen from correction from others or anything, if you are not willing to do something, you will never move forward. I guess that's what I'm saying. So if you're not willing to take part of your paycheck and set it aside in an emergency fund, you will never be ready for the coming trials. If you're not willing to work on yourself, you will never win when you face a tough time. Are you following me there?
Yeah, exactly. And I'll piggyback a little bit on that, Kyle, that when you mention accountability or holding people accountable, that all comes out of relationship. And so what I think social media has done is that people are making statements and their own opinions without relationship very well. And so it just stirs more challenges. And so I'm not going to probably be able to hold you accountable or challenge you if I don't have a good, viable relationship with you. Vice versa, I'm probably not going to allow people to challenge me who don't really know me or have a relationship with me. And so first of all, we have to continue to build healthy relationships with people. And that's the place where we have discussions and negotiation and process and work through things. And though I would maybe tend to agree a little bit, not to challenge you on that, but that maybe your culture is that way. But I have to take credit in the baby boom generation that a lot of that is because we didn't model good, healthy relationships in nuclear families of origin. When I was growing up, I hardly knew anybody's parents that were divorced. Again, my parents were divorced when I was in the early 70s, when I was 15 years old. But now you see such a spike in major divorces. So a lot of people, your generation didn't grow up with healthy relationships. So you can say, well, gosh, they don't do relationships well. Well, part of the problem is because we didn't model it well. So anyway, you guys can take credit for your problems, and my generation, I can take credit for my problems.
Now, if everybody in America and in the world and that is in conflict right now was able to do what you just did, what I just did, is just take accountability for our part, not the whole, because there's always multiple sides that have accountability for an issue. But if everybody could take the 10% that they own right now, the world would look vastly different.
Yeah, Kyle, I totally agree. We have some major problems, but if we all could make some minor adjustments in ourselves and begin to make some changes, it would radically change the things that are going on. Again, how people respond to COVID and the division over mask, no mask, or whatever it might be, or the cultural conflicts that are going on. We sometimes don't think we can make much of a difference to those bigger issues, but we really can by taking some responsibility inside of ourselves. And kind of getting back to what you said, kind of how do we do that? Well, we have to look inside, self-awareness, and then in those relationships, we have to give permission. See, I've traveled around the world, and obviously our Western culture has some really wonderful benefits, but it also has some areas that aren't as good. Meaning, I've been many times to Africa, and the Africans, they're not sensitive to one another, meaning they don't really coddle how they feel. They're very honest as a culture. They'll tell you, they'll be honest with you, they'll scream at you, they'll point out all the negative, but that's so cultural to them that they don't get offended. And so it's a cultural thing. But here in the West, we all kind of coddle our own emotions, and we've been broken, and we're fearful, and nobody's going to tell me, and we've been put down. So we have a little cultural challenge there. But what I'm trying to say, hopefully I modeled to you, probably, obviously not perfectly, but I tried to not just be a parent, especially as you guys got a little bit older, and said, hey, I realize that I'm going to make mistakes. I have made mistakes. Would you please tell me where I mess up? Obviously, approach me at a right time in a right way, so you just don't stir my defense mechanisms. But I want to own that I'm a human being, even as a dad, and I'm going to blow it, and I'm going to mess up, and I give you the permission and the freedom as my son to come and say, hey, Dad, here's some things that you did, or you said, or you didn't do, or you didn't say that have impacted me negatively. And you just don't find that often. Again, I've been in the work a long time, so it takes a courageous person in a healthy, trusted relationship to say, Would you be honest with me? Help me see myself, self-awareness. And then that's where the accountability comes from. But you got to give each other permission to do that. Otherwise, you inadvertently step over the line and you get defense mechanism and you get a reaction back, and that's what's going on in our culture. It's reaction, 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 not based on relationship or giving each other permission to say, let's sit down at the table and let's talk. Every side has a valid point, whether it be a one-on-one relationship or it's the racial issue or the mask, no mask, or politically left, right. Every part has some legitimacy there. But we're just not we're reacting rather than working a good self-aware process to help and serve each other.
As my friend Mark Neal said, you can't keep yelling. No one is going to listen to you when you're screaming at them. And we'll get back to how to handle struggles, that we're on a rabbit trail. But you can't keep screaming at people. No one will listen when you're yelling. And I think what you said is an amazing point, is that social media, a great tool when used correctly, but in times of struggle and division or turmoil, I personally don't get into any conflict on social media. I don't have any. Social media doesn't stress me out too much because I refuse to overstep my bounds when I see someone I disagree with. If I don't know them very well, nor have permission to step into their life and hold them accountable, who am I to hop into their direct messages and say, hey there, Linda, I don't like what you said about the masks. I disagree. Where in a logical brain would I think that me approaching an almost stranger through the internet on my phone and telling them what to do, who thought that would ever work? You're going to go yell at a stranger. Will that work in real life? If I walk down the street and I see somebody who doesn't have their mask over their nose, if I go scream at them and say, put your mask over your nose, do you think they're going to go, oh my gosh, he is so right. I should totally put my mask over my nose? No, they're going to immediately defend why they don't have their mask over their nose because I'm yelling. As Mark said, you can't keep yelling. You can't be screaming at people and expect them to just listen and do what you say. That's expecting them to be a robot and not a human.
Yeah, we can't really solve problems in the macro. We solve problems in the micro, meaning we solve them through smaller groups, communication, negotiation. I've spent 40 plus years in counseling and coaching dealing with conflict resolution. I basically say people don't know how to resolve conflict effectively in any or in all relationships. They're not going to live a very healthy life. And again, we could talk more about that. But one of the key things, and I won't go into all of that, but I've got a 5-step approach. But the first one is to listen. And again, that's why you can't solve these cultural things, what we're facing as a nation or as a world, if we're not listening well to another human being. And then the next point is to hear with understanding, because sometimes we're listening, but then when we're ready for a rebuttal, or we're ready to share our opinion, or we're ready to share with them how they're wrong and we're right. So listening is important, but then you have to go to the next point of hear to understand. You've got to be able to understand, because right now people are writing in their own narrative. They're listening, but then they're writing on their own narrative of what that might mean or what they mean, but they're not really hearing to understand. And then the point that I'd make that your last statement talked to me about is you got to ask questions. When you said that, did you mean this? When you said that, what did you mean? I don't understand. And so there's not enough question asking. And so, again, you started off on how do we deal with trials and struggles and troubles, and this has taken a life of its own, whether it's you wanted to go this deep or not on that. But part of that is it comes out of relationships and listening, hearing, and asking questions. And then validating. But my fourth point is validating that everybody has a right to their own opinion, even if I disagree with it. And once I find that there's a validation and a respect for that, usually I found in my counseling coaching practice that the problem is no longer the problem because they've walked a process really well. So what I see going on in our country today is we don't have healthy process. And so people are just fighting and reacting and dividing. And so it creates problems on their own personal level to live a life of joy and peace and hope and health. But then that spreads out that they don't know how to do that in context of a workplace or family or culture or community.
Right. So again, we'll go back to the struggle thing because I think we got deeper into it, but that's okay. That's how this works. So again, going back, everything that we said goes back to the main point that I am feeling from this conversation is that when people are not ready for struggles or tough times because they don't do the basic things such as learn how to listen, be in community and relationship with other people so that when tough times hit, they are ready to handle the division and the tension that's going to come along with that. Because again, like we're kind of talking, we went down the path of tension and conflict and all that, which ties right into struggle. When tough times hit, like COVID was one issue that hit everyone, but then there are the minor tributary issues of now you're at home stuck with your wife maybe or your kids, so there's tension there. So if you aren't able to listen or you don't have relationships that you've practiced being able to handle well or be self-aware, when one thing hits, 17 other things hit. And if you haven't practiced being self-aware, being in good relationships with other people instead of just trying to live life and fight every battle on your own, again, when COVID hit and then you lose your job or your business is losing money or your kids aren't in school or all of the above, if it's just you versus the world and you don't have people around you that can speak truth to you, that can help guide you through those things, or if you haven't practiced self-awareness, when you lose your job and your kids are at home and your wife is angry because there's no money and you don't know what's going on, if you have no self-awareness, you are now stuck. It's just like you have no reserves. Again, you don't have anything to tap into to help you get through that because you just had enough to get to where you were barely at. Like you said, emotionally paycheck to paycheck. So again, if COVID drains my financial resources through it, I have to replenish the resources. How do you do that? Again, relationships and being self-aware and taking feedback from others so you can replenish your tanks because tough times are coming again. The tough times, you have to prepare yourself for tough times, not for the next one, but for the rest of them that will come until you die.
Yeah, we all have tests, and if we don't pass the test, then we're not ready for the next test that'll come. And so people hope that they won't have tests, but that's not reality. Well, I certainly don't want on this call to make it sound like there are easy answers to complex problems. They're not. We're all human beings. We're very complicated. We have history. We have families of origin. We have trauma. We have goals, dreams. So there's not a lot of, I don't want to make it sound like there's a lot of easy answers. But we have to do the hard work, and this is a time that we have, I think you're saying, doing the hard work. So we want to give people a real easy, maybe easier first step to, how do you deal with the struggles? How do you deal with the trials? Now, some, obviously, because of my worldview, won't agree with this, and this might not be a step they want to take, but I really believe investigating and moving forward in their faith. We have faith in something. Again, I choose to have faith in God, but people have to go to a place where they rely on something. And what I think COVID and the cultural things are, many of the systems or situations that we've trusted in seem to be a little more fragile. They're, what we relied on, we can't go to. So one of the first things I just invite and encourage people to investigate their faith or grow in their faith or develop their faith. I think that's a key thing. And then what we just mentioned right now, Kyle, is you got to seek help. And that's either from developing friendships a little bit more, community, living life in community, not so independent. And if you need help, get in touch with a counselor, get in touch with a coach, and help them process and let them help you process. So I would say faith and relationships and community and reaching out for help, not just trying to endure this time and just hope that it's going to get over here soon and then you'll go back to normal life. That won't help you pass the test. It won't help you prepare for the next test. So I know that might sound a little simple, but maybe that's a 4-step approach or a prong that think about faith, think about God, think about resources outside of yourself, think about those relationships that you can go and develop and build a little bit better and see how do you find yourself in greater community. So there's lots of resources that you need. And then if you're in a place where you are just really struggling and it's a hard, heavy time, is reach out to a professional, in a life coach or a counselor or a pastor that can help you. So maybe those 4 components can help people.
Yeah, and I guess we'll just wrap it up by saying, I guess not simply, but look, if what's going on right now, as your 92-year-old father said, this is the toughest time he's ever seen America in. If this hasn't woken you up to either you've realized, man, I was well prepared for struggles, which is probably a small percentage. Even I have been like, man, I got to prepare better. Even though I had money set aside. I thought I was good. I didn't. You can't predict the future. So again, I believe that the majority of my generation has realized they are not ready for huge struggles. They thought they were ready for tough times, and they made it through their breakup in high school, and they made it through the college thing that hurt their feelings or the job that they lost. And so they thought they could handle struggle. But this is real struggle. Again, American struggle versus actual global struggle, as you who've spent a lot of time. And I love people that have tried to use missionaries to Africa as some type of negative thing, saying, oh, yeah, you just visited Africa and think you know about race. No, I want to make it very clear. You spent a lot of my childhood in Africa, not just a few days. So you've seen what goes on in actual third world countries. You've seen how people actually live in actual struggle. And I don't want to I don't want it to sound like I'm downplaying people's problems and issues in America. But I do want to say this is what I would like to end it with, is that my tactic, on top of yours, the biggest thing that has helped me on a very simple, practical level is being grateful, as a mindset of gratitude. Again, when on the 4th of July, there was a lot of tension, and I had to consciously go, so much is broken in America, and America has been broken for a very long time in many ways, but I didn't wake up in Indonesia or Malaysia with 1 billion people with massive starvation, lack of food, lack of clean water, lack of utilities, light. Like, I had to be grateful that, yeah, I woke up in a broken country, but it's not the most broken. And that's called gratitude. If you're able to, again, you've seen the horrors. You've almost not made it out of countries in Africa alive. So you've seen the horrors of war-torn, famine-infested countries where people just hope for another day. And so I hope, again, all this to say, I hope people can learn a simple moment of gratitude can change the direction of your day, week, month, year. And if you make it a habit, gratitude will change your life. If you can wake up, and when you face tough times and when you face situations that make you feel as if I don't have any control or this will never get better, you have to take a step back and go, what do I have that's good? I have lights, I have water, I have food, I have a hat. Most people can't buy a $20 hat. Most people are looking for water in 99% of the world. I have all this stuff. I'm looking at you through a nice iPhone. I have many things around me. I have a lot of stuff. Yeah, I have less money because of COVID. Yeah, I have to wear a mask. It's not comfy. But those are very small issues compared to the macro struggle of 99% of the world. So again, all that being said is I think your tactics were all incredible. And I just want to add my small voice, because you have a lot more experience in life and struggle and dealing with struggle that I do. But my small experience with it, I'll tell people, and you know it, and it's the truest thing. If you are not grateful, you will never be able to face struggle well. You won't. If you can't take a inventory of the things you have, when you start to have less, you will always just see it as a negative, and you'll never make it out of that hole that you dig yourself into.
Well, I totally agree with you. And before I kind of reply to that, first of all, I think you have a good looking hat.
Thank
Colorado.
you for buying it.
I just wondered who got you that hat. Thanks, Pops. Thanks, Dad. So anyway, it's a good looking hat. No, Kyle, and I want to tell you, I so appreciate you clarifying the whole idea of gratitude. That your posts and our communication for that even helps me, because I can get so involved in life and my problems and people's problems and America's problems that I forget that. So I think you're a real a leader and a real champion in giving that a very small but very profound reality is people being grateful. I guess I just finally say with that is that you can't give your power away. You can't give your power away to problems. You can't give your power away to all the negative issues that we're all facing. You need to keep your own power. What I mean by that is you have the ability to make choices that change yourself and change others. I think that's why people get so desperate, is that they're looking at problems that they feel like they can't do anything about. In the macro, that's probably true, but in the micro, it's not. Is if they can make choices, like you said, to have an attitude of gratitude, it will change them, and then it will change their environment and the people that they're around. So I just thank you for highlighting that in times of struggle, how do we do it? You can't give your power away to a problem. You can't give your power away to the crises. You've got to keep your power, be grateful, be kind, be loving, consider others more important than yourself, and that will guide you through the trials and the struggles that we all face.
I think you're right. I think if you are not able to be, if you are faced with a tough situation in life, as we all have been, if you are not able to hold on to a grateful perspective, you will be pummeled by the struggles.
True.
You'll be pummeled by life.
Great point.
Life is not coming at you as your friend. And I don't mean that everything is against you, but I mean, you are promised difficulties. I promise you life is tough. If you haven't figured that out by now, God bless you. Good luck to you. But life is a struggle, not a constant struggle, but it is a struggle. And if you can't be grateful for the things around you, if you have nothing to grab onto when you're falling, you will continue to fall. So anyways, thanks for your time. I know you're probably going to hop on another call after this. You're a busy guy, but appreciate your time. Appreciate your wisdom. Thanks for being you. You're a blessing.
I appreciate the opportunity, and you know how much I love and appreciate you. I respect you tons, and I hope our time together has been helpful to anybody that jumps on and listens. We care about them, we love them, and we want them to do well in life.
That's right. It's all love to everybody out there. Thank you guys for listening. Thank you guys for watching. This has been another episode of Inside the Mirror.